What's up, you beautiful bastards? It's been a while, but with the War Within now officially going to be launched about 2 months from the creation of this video, I figured it was about time that I made another video for new and returning players about what to expect, what are the biggest changes to World of Warcraft since you've been gone, or if you're new, what you should do first. And let's just cut the bullshit, do the drop, and in the interest of time, get this video rolling.
I am Razio.
Welcome back. First and foremost, guys, if you're brand new to the game or you haven't touched World of Warcraft in a very long time, and you pre-ordered an edition of the game that gets you a free character boost, please, for the love of God, don't use it. Don't use it. No. It's far better if you just try to experience the game from the beginning again, which is a lot easier, as I will explain with the new systems coming into play here in terms of leveling up your characters. Trust me, you don't want to be that guy or gal who's in the dungeon and doesn't know their class and is clearly a free boost and you just fuck everything up for everybody. Don't be that guy or gal, please. Just don't do it.
Dumbass.
Now, one of the biggest changes coming to World of Warcraft, as you can see, I'm on the beta right now, right here in front of you, is the warband feature. Now, the warband is very similar if you played Lost Ark or anything like that, where now a lot of things in the game are bound to your warband, or your whole account is a better way to put it. And so instead of having to constantly switch servers, if you have characters across, several servers, right here you can just pick between your characters that you have active. The characters that you play the most will be listed all the way down here and be sitting around your little campfire. And the reason why I'm talking about warbands first before I talk about leveling is because how big of a change warbands are will affect leveling. So let's just log into the game here. As you can see, these are all pre-made characters. These aren't my actual characters. You can't transfer characters from your retail version to the beta yet. I think they're adding that here soon. But let's just enter the game here, and we will show you now why warbanding and leveling is so effective. Now, if you're new to the game, if you make a brand new account, or if you haven't played the game for a long time, when you create a new character, you will be given either put right into Exile's Reach, which is the beginning leveling zone, or if you're a returning player, giving the option of doing Exile's Reach. Always choose, regardless, do Exile's Reach. It helps you teach you the ropes of the game, your class, the basics of what class and spec you picked, how groups and dungeons and all that stuff works, and then you're done with Exile's Reach by the time character hits level 10, 11-ish, and then you're thrust out into the world. Then from that point on, if it's a brand new account, the game will by default try to push you into Dragonflight as your leveling experience. So by leveling experience, I mean from level 10, 11-ish, all the way to level 70, which is where the War Within expansion will start. If you want to do Dragonflight, which is a great expansion, it's fun, it was a great learning experience, as far as like how to, the new dragon riding, which I'll get to in a minute, just do that. But if you don't want to level up to Dragonflight, if you have a nostalgic bone in your body for something elsewhere, you can, if you're like an Alliance here, as I am on my Death Knight here, you can come up to Chromie and say you want to do time walking, and then you can choose. It's not letting me choose a timeline because I'm already max level, but you can choose any expansion to level up in. Now, whatever expansion you choose, you'll roughly stay in that expansion to level up until about level 60-ish, 61-ish, and then the game again will force you into Dragonflight for the last 9-10 levels before it lets you into the War Within. So if you want to level up, up to 60, 61-ish in Wrath of the Lich King, Burning Crusade, any of them, feel free to choose whatever you want. If for those of you, efficient bastards who like to, be so efficient that you take the fun right out of the game, as it were, then Warlords of Draenor is the fastest expansion with the most experience and the fastest way to level up. Just so you know, you're welcome. Now, for those of you who are new to the game, continue to level up through Exile's Reach, then go into the Dragonflight expansion is the one that defaults you to. And then once you're like level 68-ish, it's going to now activate War Within. This is assuming War Within is launched. If it's not launched yet and you're starting right before in the next 2 months, everything I just said still applies, but you won't be able to do War Within until it launches. But The same rules apply. Now, why the warband is so important here is because once you have any character in your warband at level cap, all the rest of your characters get a 5% permanent experience buff for leveling up. If you have 2 characters, now it becomes 10%. This stacks up to 5 times. So once you have 5 characters at level cap, all of your characters you level up after that are going to get a permanent 25% buff to how much experience they receive in all content they do until they're level capped as well. So that's something really good to know. Moving on to the next major thing about the expansion. Now, like with any expansion, there's going to be new raids, 8 new dungeons, there's going to be, new Mythic Plus seasons, which, by the way, in the Mythic Plus seasons, they took out quite a fair number of affixes and are making some new ones, which are still up in beta test, so I won't say much about that. But Mythic Plus, again, is returning, as I know a lot of people enjoy that. But there's going to be 4 new zones to level up through. There's the Isle of Dorn, the Ringing Deeps, Hollowfall, and Oz-Kahet, which are the new zones. There's a new allied race. These are all just minor things, that kind of come with any expansion. We have the Earthens, or like the stone, the original OG stone dwarves you can be, which you can be Horde or Alliance as an Earthen, as far as I know. And then they have their own set of racials. They're changing the human racial, just so you're aware, of diplomacy, where you can't get a bunch of bonus rep because of how warbands work now. So instead, they gave humans one of their racials is now their Hearthstone cooldown is cut in half and has 2 charges. Again, really useful, so humans are still really good in that regard. But let's talk more about warbands and why they're such a huge feature. Probably one of the biggest features of the expansion. And that's because in your warband, there are multiple things now that are shareable across all characters that are part of your warband, essentially your entire account. You have a warband bank, so anything you put in that bank, and everyone in your warband has access to. You don't have to swap characters to access this bank. They all get it. Transferable gear. There'll be gear that drops that is warbound as opposed to soulbound, and anyone in your group, in your warband, can use the gear. Once they equip it, then it becomes soulbound, but yeah, there's warbound loot that will drop. There's also going to be a lot of the currencies in the game are transferable, such as gold and other useful currencies that are part of the expansion and previous expansions will now be transferable between characters without logging on to different characters. You can just have it there and just grab it. And the other big thing is account-wide progression is a big thing. So reputations, all the transmogs you pick up, flight paths, and the new system of delves, and even achievements are all going to be account-wide. Very, very good. You don't have to grind out the same rep on all your characters. Now, right at the launch of War Within, only the War Within and I think Dragonflight reps are going to be shared across everything. They're going to, as the expansion goes on, retroactively add in all the reputations from like Burning Crusade, Wrath of the Lich King, and all that stuff. So by the end of War Within, they'll all be shared. But the most recent ones will be the ones that are in right at launch. Now, let's talk about how Blizzard has successfully, as they promised, stayed away from borrowed power, and the new talent system that is being added in. Again, we got the whole new talent system added in Dragonflight, but now we're adding hero talents in War Within, and let's explore that right now. So if you're unfamiliar, if you haven't been in the game for a long time, maybe the last time you played was, Vanilla BC, Wrath of the Lich King, or shit, maybe even you've played more recently, such as in Legion, Mists of Pandaria, and Cataclysm. The talent system has had a massive overhaul in the current expansion, which is about to end, Dragonflight, which I will show you now. Every class has 3 specs, with the exception of Druids, who have 4, and with the exception of also Demon Hunters, which have 2. But you pick your spec. Right now I have Blood active. Now, here's what's different. Okay, so this left side of your tree here is always going to be your talent tree that is for your class. So Death Knight, no matter what spec I am in Death Knight, this tree is always going to be here. Now, I might change some talents around because I'm playing Frost or Unholy instead of Blood, or if I'm doing Mythic Plus as opposed to Raiding or PvP, I'll change some of these talents around. Changing talents is very, very easy. It's as simple as left-clicking one, putting a point somewhere else. And you can just move those around as much as you want. You can save loadouts. Here's another thing where in War Within it's changing. In Dragonflight, you could have a maximum of 10 loadouts on your character for your talent specs, which is not enough because you may have a PvP spec and a raid spec, and multiple specs for different specializations, and you just didn't have enough. Now, instead of 10 in War Within, you're going to have 40. So quite a few loadouts you can save. Now, this side of the tree, the right side of your tree, is going to change depending on what spec you are. So there's a different tree for Blood, Frost, and Unholy, using Death Knight again as an example. I've mained Death Knight since Wrath, and I don't plan on fucking stopping now. But and then you have down here your PvP talents. These you can freely change. These talents and these abilities are only active when you have PvP enabled. Which, if you don't know, there are no PvP specific servers anymore. Excuse me. They are now just every server you can activate war mode, where you can now PvP other people and they can PvP you if they have war mode turned on. Very simple. What are the advantages to having war mode turned on? There's specific gear pieces, PvP gear pieces that drop in the open world that you can't get unless war mode is on. And every quest you do and every enemy you kill gives you slightly more experience because the risk is higher if you have war mode turned on. And that's pretty much it. Anyway, moving on. Down here. So we have the blood trees, right? Now what they're adding in, and they changed quite a bit. If you don't know, you can go on Wowhead and look. They're still changing a lot of these talents. Almost every tree in the game got a serious overhaul from Dragonflight to War Within, and from what I've seen, all of them have been a drastic improvement. Now what is a hero talent tree? You can see it here. Now every spec class in the game, I should say, has 3 hero talent trees. But every spec only has access to 2. For example, Blood Death Knights only have access between Deathbringer and Sand Lane. The third one, which is, Riders of the Apocalypse, is not accessible. And now if I was in Unholy DK, Unholy DKs have access to, I believe, Sand Lane and Riders of the Apocalypse. Frost DKs have access to Deathbringer and Riders of the Apocalypse, but not Sand Lane. So you kind of see what's going on here, and these can be swapped at any time as long as you're not in combat. Now don't fret. As you level from 71 to 80, which is the level cap in War Within, you will get all the talent points in every talent point slot filled for this special ability. Now a lot of these hero talents change the way certain abilities work, add procs. Some are just passive bonuses, but most are not. Most actively change the way the spec will play. So Sand Lane rotation and between Sand Lane and Deathbringer would be quite different. And we don't know yet what's meta. We don't know yet what's going to be best and what. And I'm not here to tell you, but play what you think is fun. Fuck the meta. That's always been my motto. But let's use Sand Lane examples. You may say, hey Raz, well, since you get all the points, isn't it kind of pointless? No, it's not, and I'll tell you why. So if you do minimize, every single hero spec has 3 of their talents that are not that are choosable. They're not like permanent in terms of you just pick it up. You can switch these. So for example, right now I have Vampiric Speed, which means my Death Advance and Wraithwalk movement speed are increased by 10. I can change this to something else depending on the content I'm doing, right? Your newly turned Raise an Ally gives full health and grabs an Absorb Shield to people I battle res, right? So I can pick. So if I'm out in the open world or I'm doing a boss fight, let's say where, you know what, there's not a lot of movement for me required, I would switch to Newly Turned. Down here, right, we have Bloody Fortitude, so it drastically increases the effectiveness and potency of one of my biggest defensive cooldowns, but let's say I don't really need that in this fight. I can switch here, where I want something more passive, switch it over to Vampiric Aura. Here, Pact of the Sand Lane, I store 50% of all shadow damage dealt into a Blood Beast that'll then explode, or I can make my Death Coil and Death Strike have 50% chance to increase the procs of the main ability in this tree, which is Vampiric Strike, right? So they're going to swap these around, and they're swappable as you go, just like the talents here. As long as you're not in combat, you can switch stuff around, right? And just activate it. So hero talents are going to give a whole new flavor to every single spec in the game, and again, expect balance to change drastically as we get out of the beta and into launch and for metas to form. But overall, this is an evergreen system they plan on keeping in. Again, Blizzard said they're staying away from borrowed power now, so in the future expansions after this, I fully expect to see them add new hero trees to the pool that you have more access to, or adding a talent or two to this as we go on. These are always going to change up depending on what balance needed, but these are the new talent systems where you can really make your class and spec your own. All right, guys, now speaking of shit that's evergreen, one of the best features of Dragonflight that's absolutely loved by the majority of the player base has been the new dragon riding, which is a much better way of how the flying mounts will now work in the game, and they kept it. They carried it over, and they've made most of your old mounts able to dragon ride as well. They said at launch of War Within there'll be about 464 of the mounts that have sky riding enabled. They renamed dragon riding to sky riding. You can see here which mounts are skywriting. If you look at your mounts here, see it says skywriting underneath if it's enabled. Some mounts will not have it because the models aren't designed that way yet, but Blizzard's goal is to eventually have every flying mount in the game work this way, work like the flying mounts you see here. I'm in Stormwind and I'm able to fly around. And you're going to have, now the skywriting has talent trees as well. Now with skywriting, as you can see here, you can come up here and you can see the skills and stuff you unlock, and you can actually activate this where you can have people ride along on your mounts with you. Or you can allow it or disallow it. I always have it allowed so people can jump on your mount, and pretty much most of the mounts in the game become multi-seated mounts if you're like carrying a friend around, right? So very, very, very cool aspect of the game that's been added in. And here are the talent points. Eventually you just get them all and you get all the skills, right? Much smaller than Dragon Riding's talent tree, which is fine. In addition, if you are one of the rare people that does not like skywriting, dragon riding, you didn't like it, maybe it made you sick, or you just couldn't handle it because you're a scrub,
that's really fucked up.
You can switch flight styles. So you can change back to the Burning Crusade, the regular just flying mount style if you want to. It's a 5-second cast. And once you have it casted, you switched it out. And now if I were to mount, it's back to the old way. It's just back to the old way of flying. I don't know why anyone in their right mind would do this unless there's maybe a quest or something that makes it too hard to fly around. But anyway, skywriting is back. It's much akin to like Guild Wars 2 way of skywriting, and it's fantastic. Great addition to the game. Now, another major system that's being added into the game is very reminiscent of a system that was added in Mists of Pandaria and scrapped later, which was Scenarios, and this is called Delves. It's open world content. Now, I haven't done any of this in the beta yet. I don't want to spoil too much, but in the background you have some footage here of the official released footage of a delve being done, where you pretty much get the Dragonflight Expedition and Brand's Bronzebeard to come in, and you can give him gear, and it doesn't matter what spec you are. You can go through, it's open world content where you find like an instance. You can go up to people up to 4 players, or you can go by yourself, and you go through these small mini dungeons or mini areas that are instance where you just go in. It's supposed to be phase free, no loading screens. You just phase right into it, and you can get some nice open world rewards such as gear, mounts, pets, things like that. And some of them are pretty easy and some of them are meant to be pretty challenging. Now what they've done, if you're unfamiliar, they've added in the Great Vault, which has been now in the game since Shadowlands. Before that it was kind of in there with BFA, where what content you would do throughout the week, when the weekly reset would happen, you can go into the vault and pick one piece of gear from a row. They had the PvE raid gear, row, 3 tiers you can unlock, and how high the item level is depending on how high of the content you cleared that week, a Mythic Plus gear, and in the past 2 expansions there was the PvP row. The PvP row has been removed and replaced with the open world row, which is for the vault. Now PvP players may be going, what the hell, where do I get my gear? Well, don't worry. What they've done to resolve that is they said a lot of PvP players, you know, it's not very fun having to pick between a PvE piece and a PvP piece every week, because especially a lot of PvE players are also PvP players. So what they did instead is, when you are PvPing, current level gear for PvP, because PvP gear is not very useful in PvE anyway, but current level PvP gear will drop much more frequently and constantly throughout the week as you're PvPing. So you get the rewards immediately, as opposed to having to have it be an option for if you're going to use it or not. So it'll be much easier and quicker to get PvP gear just by PvPing each week and not having to wait for the Great Vault, having to choose between getting a piece of PvP gear or PvE gear for the week. So in my opinion, that's fine. But yeah, Delves are the new content that's replacing that PvE line. And I don't know, we'll see how it works. I mean, it definitely seems like a piece of content for new players or for players that are more solo-esque players and aren't really into as much, playing with other players and, doing the higher-end raids and stuff like that, or higher-end Mythic Plus keys. But that's something else that's really awesome, is you never know. They may add some delves that require you to have another player or 2 to get through them because they're that difficult. I hope so. We'll see. And on that note, I also want to point out that Mythic Plus keys have changed drastically as well. As in old expansions, you'd have players trying to push 22, 23 plus keys. Now the levels have been condensed much more, so like a level 10 key now is like a level 20 key from back in the past. So you don't have to go as high in key numbers to get your achievements and your mounts, but the difficulty curve is still the same. Now, obviously, there's a bunch of other minor changes in there as well. The GUI has changed drastically. For those of you who haven't been here in Dragonflight, you can completely edit your GUI much in the same way that you can in without add-ons that you can in like games like Final Fantasy XIV and other Elder Scrolls, stuff like that. You can move everything around as you see fit, resize everything now, and they're continually adding to that. Things are a lot cleaner. As you can see, the profession changes that are coming in. They're not really changing much about professions. They're just carrying on the big changes they did to professions in Dragonflight over. So now you just have new recipes and new talent trees for your professions to learn for this expansion coming out. They may add more to that later, but of course, you're getting better, cleaner spell books, things like this. You're getting just stuff that's a lot cleaner than we've seen in the past. But yeah, anyway, guys, that's pretty much the biggest things that are different about this time going around. Obviously, there's new dungeons, new raids, as per usual, new PvP seasons, new Mythic Plus seasons. But overall, those are the biggest changes, and the nicest thing about them is, as Blizzard said, they're evergreen and they'll continue on. It's not borrowed power. They'll continue on into the next expansion. They are still adding throughout the raid maybe 1 or 2 very unique legendary items per expansion. They're still doing tier sets. They brought those back. They're not doing it to where everyone has a bunch of legendaries on all the time like they did in Shadowlands and Battle for Azeroth, stuff like that. This is all just legendaries are back to how they were. Anyway, guys, thoughts, opinions, comments down below. Let me know what you think, and hopefully we'll see you all in the War Within, and obviously coming up with the Elden Ring expansion that's coming out as well. So a lot of fun to be gaming ahead this summer. Take care of yourselves, and as always, my friends, keep it real.